Mark Carney has declared victory.
With congratulations out of the way,
Not one, but two defeats for Pierre Poilievre.
The Conservatives could ask an MP to step aside.
He addressed the media this morning and said he is ready to work with anyone.
Even better result the next time the Canadians decide the future for the country.
Hi folks, can someone just tell me what just happened? The 2025 Canadian federal election just wrapped up. And let's be honest, a lot of us didn't expect this result.
We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over.
Carney's Liberals won, even though polls not long ago had them trailing the Conservatives by over 20 points. Trudeau just had a -52 approval rating back in December. The economy wasn't great, people were tired, and everything pointed to a Poilievre landslide. And yet, here we are. Liberals are back in power. I honestly don't think it was a fluke. I believe it's a shift, and it's partially due to familiarity for people. This election, unfortunately, wasn't just about our own domestic things. This campaign turned into something much bigger. Let's break it all down together. Okay, so I honestly think a huge part of this came down to one name. Of course, y'all know it, Donald Trump. In all reality, he ruined it for the Conservatives. We have Donald Trump to thank for this one. And the unfortunate part is, he doesn't even live here. But when he hopped on Truth Social and started floating the idea of Canada becoming America's 51st state, that wasn't just some throwaway joke. It turned the entire vibe of this whole election upside down. We were now voting for many more reasons than just the economy and some policies. Suddenly people stopped caring as much about grocery prices and housing costs and started asking themselves, who's actually going to protect this country's sovereignty? And who do I feel comfortable with? Well, it turns out a lot of Canadians thought that person was Mark Carney and not Poilievre. Here's where it gets really absurd though. Doug Ford, I think we all know him, the Premier of Ontario and a huge Conservative, never once came out to support Pierre Poilievre. Not once. In his own province.
It's not business as usual. That's not going to cut it. We have to make sure that we move fast, immediate, or if not, President Trump is going to eat our lunch.
That's odd, right? Am I the only one asking myself this question? If you're trying to win a federal election and the biggest Conservative name in the most vote-rich province just stays quiet, that had to hurt. Did that silence cost Poilievre the win? It's hard to say for sure, but you can't ignore it either. It's like the political equivalent of your teammate sitting out the championship game. But this whole thing, it wasn't just about leaders and party colors. It felt bigger than that. We're at one of those hinge moments in history. Our relationship with the US, that slow, steady integration we've relied on since World War II, that era feels like it's ending. Open global trade, cross-border stability, that's not a given anymore. Especially when Trump is out here threatening trade wars and casually floating annexation. And when that kind of instability creeps in from our closest neighbor, it changes how people vote. Suddenly, stability matters more than slogans. Carney, love him or hate him, brought that vibe. He ran central banks in Canada and the UK, dealt with Brexit and the 2008 financial crash. That experience, it counted this time, and it got him the win.
And it's a vote also, I think, for political stability. People were impressed by the fact that this guy had run a central bank in Britain and had run a central bank in Canada and had been in two huge epical economic crises, Brexit on the one hand and the 2008 meltdown. And I think that convinced them to go with a party that otherwise I think they were going to throw out.
Here's another factor, the system itself. Canada runs on first past the post, which means you don't need the majority of votes to win. You just need to win the most amount of seats. And because Liberal support is spread out more evenly across ridings, while Conservative support is more concentrated in certain areas like Alberta and Saskatchewan, the math often favors the Liberals. So even though the Liberals only beat the Conservatives by about 1.5% in the popular vote, they walked away with a much bigger chunk of seats. Liberals are sitting at 169 seats and Conservatives are sitting at 144. And can we just pause and talk about the NDP for one quick moment? Because wow, that was rough, almost embarrassing. The NDP got crushed down to just 7 seats. Sin stepped down the day of the elections, which doesn't come as a surprise. Honestly, the Liberals didn't just win. They also scooped up a ton of those NDP votes, which in all reality contributed very much to their win. It was like the left collapsed into one camp and the Liberals benefited big time. That also explains how they were able to edge out the Conservatives even without a clear majority. And now back to Ford for 1 second, because again, it matters. This guy is Premier of Ontario. You'd think he'd be out front supporting his federal counterpart, right? Especially when the race is this close. But nope, total silence. Didn't even hit the campaign trail. Didn't tweet, support, nothing. And that silence was deafening. Does it mean there's tension between provincial and federal Conservatives? Or was Ford just trying to keep his distance? Either way, it wasn't a good look. All right, you guys, if you're still watching and enjoying this breakdown, please do me a quick favor and tap that like button. It really helps push this video out to more people. And if you want more Canadian takes like this, please subscribe. I seriously appreciate your support. Okay, now let's go back to the numbers for one quick second. The Conservatives did better than a lot of people expected. Most polls had them topping out at around 38%. But they ended up over 41%. That's a legit gain from 2021. But even with that momentum, they fell short. And get this, Poilievre himself lost his seat.
But the shocking upset for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who had held the local riding of Carleton since 2004.
Imagine winning the second most seats in the country and your own riding doesn't get you a seat in Parliament. That's rough. Let's talk about that for one quick moment though, because I think it's worth discussing. Pierre's name appeared on a ballot alongside 91 other candidates in the Carleton riding. 91. Imagine being a voter and having to look through 91 names. Such an extensive list of candidates can be misleading to voters, potentially creating the impression of widespread support or causing confusion during the voting process. But you don't really hear much about that. To me, personally, that's not democracy. Trying to mislead people during such a delicate time. And then there's Carney. He entered the race when the Liberals were down bad, like 25 points behind. Honestly, looked hopeless. But I believe he can honestly thank Trump for this big win. Voters saw stability, big picture economics, all the stuff that made voters nervous about Trump's influence. I want to make one thing clear. I can't say I'm concretely conservative or liberal. In the past, I have voted for both parties for different reasons. It has always been based on the current conditions of our country and what I feel like we are in need of at those specific times and circumstances, and what representative I would think would be best suited for the job. Michael Ingantieff, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, said something interesting about all of this. He called the election less a victory for centrism or liberalism and more a reaction to external chaos. Trump, instability, the end of the old global trade system, that all made Canadians lean towards a safe choice. Not necessarily because they were in love with Carney or the Liberals.
Which is that it's a victory for liberalism and centralism. I just think we don't know. Canada's Canada. It's not Britain. It's not France. It's sui generis because we sit beside this gigantic economy. It's always determined a lot of what's possible for us. And we've just been kicked in the teeth by our oldest friend, our oldest partner, our neighbor, our friend. And because of that, it's just convulsed the political system. I think there's one implication that is clear, which is that the conservative, Pierre Poilievre, got his vote out. There's no question. His vote is very strong, but he lost because I think on balance, Canadians thought he sounded much too much like a MAGA Republican.
But because they weren't sold on the alternative. And honestly, you can feel it. Canada's politics are starting to shift away from that old left versus right model. It's becoming more about who can hold the line when the world outside gets messy. That being said, Carney still doesn't have a majority. He's at 169 seats short of the 172 needed. So now we're probably looking at another minority government, unless Carney cuts a deal with whoever replaces Sin as NDP leader. Trudeau pulled that off back in 2021 with a confidence and supply agreement that kept things relatively stable. Can Carney do the same? I mean, maybe, but he's slightly more centrist than Trudeau. And the NDP might be looking to reassert themselves after this horrid loss. That could complicate things. Still, he's in a way better position than anyone expected 6 months ago. And for now, that's enough to form government. So let's zoom out for one quick second. This election says a lot about where Canadians are at. There's frustration, there's fatigue, but there's also a real fear of instability. And when the choices came down to a guy who sounded too much like Trump, although I never understood that, to be honest, and a guy who used to run the Bank of Canada,
Carney struck a note which was more moderate, more cautious, more Canadian, but also equally intransigent.
People went with the one who felt more Canadian. We're living next to a giant superpower that's going through major political convulsions. It's impossible not to be affected by that. And honestly, this vote might be Canada's way of saying, we're gonna do our own thing. We're not following that path. Although this time around, I did vote for Pierre and the Conservatives, but I am okay to give Carney a chance and see what he does with this win. He's got a shot to stabilize things, maybe even change the tone of politics up here. Or maybe it'll all fall apart in 6 months. Who knows? But either way, that was one wild election. Okay, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you're into content like this, please give me a big thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Lastly, let me know in the comments, do you think Doug Ford's silence hurt Poilievre? Did Trump actually swing our election? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.